Welcome to another episode of Asian Agribiz podcast. I'm Arif Fahrudin, and today we will be listening to our Malaysian correspondent Rajeswari Ramani speak to Evonik's Kristof Mertens. Mr. Mertens is the creator of Porphyrio, an integrated data collection management system for the poultry industry that could revolutionize the way poultry products are produced.
Implementing smart technologies in livestock farming not only emancipates farmers from traditionally tedious procedures like data collecting and analysis, but is crucial when it comes to dealing with sustainability issues due to rising meat consumption. We addressed both topics in the poultry farming sector with Mr. Kristof Mertens. Welcome, Kristof.
Good morning.
Good morning. So can you tell us what constitutes the smart farming and what are its key components, i.e. robotics and its platforms?
Well, so if you talk about smart farming as a general, you talk about using as much information as possible to make better, reach smarter decisions in doing let's say, the production process. And when you talk about these decisions can be just at the basics of day-to-day management, making sure that the chickens get the right feed, get the right climate around them, are producing to the standards. But it can also be decisions in terms of improving feed strategies or climate programs to look at environmental issues, like maybe manure issues, ammonia expansion, and so on. So basically, it's all around making things more efficient and more fit to the needs, both of the end product, of the food that we are producing, and to the regulations and to our environment, to the climate.
How does it help in terms of profitability?
Well, the first, smart farming is not something that you start from one day to another. Every business has a certain goal of producing, and on the basis of that is profitability, obviously. Now, in function of what you do as a company, if you are producing birds for a live market, or if you're producing eggs just for the normal market, or if you're more in an industrialized process where you process your chickens for, let's say, retailers, fast food restaurants, that's completely different business rationale is. So in function of what you do as a business, you have to choose what information is really important for us and what are the steps that we can make to improve our process and hence to improve our profitability. And let me just give you a small example with that. When we look at broiler production and you think about smart farming, of course, everybody's talking about the broiler weight, and then you can imagine, okay, let's put weighing scales in a chicken house. One weighing scale, is it two weighing scales? Actually, if you want to be really sure, you should have two and more weighing scales, well calibrated, but that it comes at a cost, of course, an investment cost. So if you're producing only for the live market, the wet market, as we say, you don't need so many weighing scales because the bird weight is essentially not so important for that live market. Well, if you go to processing, then the investment in bird scales in each of your chicken houses to know better what birds will be arrived at your processing plant, it becomes more important because you have the right chicken, you can sell the right food product to your retailer, you have your good margin. So you have to make that exercise. What kind of investment do I need for my business in order to make a step in smart farming? And what we often see is that with the existing hardware present at farms, investments already made, there's already a lot more to do with the data as they are, just by looking at a smart way of managing the data and analyzing the data. So the profitability question is one that is tailored to each and every single business and should be the starting point of drawing out a strategy for smart farming, to our opinion.
How does one integrate smart technologies in existing operations?
Yes, these are important parameters, of course, depending on your production facilities. If you have more small-scale farms, let's say that you work with 500 farmers with all 1 or 2 houses with 4, 5, 6,000 chickens, which is still very present in the Asian market. Yeah, then a simple smartphone app to get data from these farms is already a first step to get a better understanding of what is happening at these farms. If you are on the other side looking at chicken barns with 50, 60, 90,000, 150,000 birds, then there's more automation and a more higher level of technology, maybe some robotics and weighing scales, automatic connections with the climate control systems that you can in real time read what is happening in the chicken house. That can make sense in that case.
How does gadgets like sensors work together with analytical data collection platforms?
We are in the phase of the explosion of Internet of Things and new sensors, and sensors become more cheaper. So indeed, it might make sense to have a sound monitor in the chicken house for some organizations who work with a very antibiotic-free production. You want to monitor sickness as soon as possible. We're all aiming for that, but some companies taking the lead. So in that case, that gadget becomes an essential part of your infrastructure to be sure that you can monitor these chickens very regularly and that you can make sure that the production is going well. And obviously, it's easier for a big company to have everything into one platform. That's also a rationale that we at Evonik PLF surely have, that we want to work towards that. But it's a stepwise process. And you see the situation as is today. There's already multiple gadgets, as you say, or say different types of hardware. There's different types of software. And we are in the process as a sector now to let these systems communicate to each other in a better way, so that it becomes indeed for a producer possible to work with 1 or 2 parties and to get then everything together. First of all, data collected, and of course get the information analyzed. Because I agree with you, a standalone gadget with its separate app, it's just giving you 1 parameter probably, or 2 parameters. While the production process is hundreds of parameters to monitor at simultaneously.
Yes, exactly. And how about the data collection and the analysis? Like how safe the data collection will be, where it's kept, and how good quality the data will be in terms of analysis as well. How do we discern that?
Well, you asked 2 important questions. So how data collection will be, it will be easier and via smart IoT solutions. And so we see a big progress in there and a fast development. We have as a sector, as an agriculture sector, we have the luck to be lacking behind on technology and automation. That means that there's a lot of technology around, and it's important that we adopt the existing technology to our sector. So technology-wise, there's a lot of things possible. We just need to make sure that we adopt it for us, and then be able to collect information in the chicken house during the transport, which is relevant to know if everything goes well. Then when data is collected, the question of storage. And indeed, today you still see, well, with a certain number of companies, you still see a threshold when it comes to putting data in the cloud. But if you see, and I advise all these people to just have some movies of Amazon and some of these big tech companies. Today, banks and the CIA, they are all in the cloud, because in these clouds, the security is much higher than you can ever do with an own IT team and with your own server park. So it's the strange thing about that is that the same people that say, no, we don't want to put our data in the cloud, at the same time, they have their mobile phone at the hand and all their personal information, including banking, including all their private life, is all in the cloud. But chicken information cannot go into the cloud. And I know about competition and I understand, but these worries will be taking away, are taking away. And you see the leading companies, they don't see so much concern with it anymore. So in practice, what we will go to in the end is a kind of a hybrid model to store data at the farm and in a cloud, where it doesn't make sense to transfer too much data from the farm to the cloud. All of that data can still reside at the farm, and that the analytics of the key elements can even be done locally. They call that fog computing even. There's new terms. It just means that we're also using the cloud infrastructure in a more efficient way. But in the end, data will be centralized and should be centralized to be able to combine them, to combine the information of the farm with the feed mill, with the hatchery, with health information, with weather information from whatever weather service in order to do a good analysis. And that was also your second question. How about analytics? There we are in a beginning phase, and we are already working on that for more than 15, 20 years, laying the basis. But the data is now getting more and more. So now also the analytics part of this whole story can be further developed into techniques like artificial intelligence, machine learning. They start to find their first applications. And with that, of course, the quality of the data going in is important. And so when new sensors are developed, it's a responsibility of the company doing that, but at the same time also of the people using the systems, that the data which is collected is correct and or can be interpreted correct. You have to know what you measure, and when you understand that, then you can train algorithms. You can explain the algorithm. The chicken weight that we get is always at the end of the day, the chickens are not sober. So this you need to take into account as an example for that.
How does set parameters in systems such as Porphyrio work together with external factors?
In the Porphyrio system that we developed over the years, we have 15,000 parameters or more to characterize all production of our customers, of our global customers. So the parameters again links to what you are producing, but in essence, the parameters at the core of each poultry production are how much. Well, one of our first customers, he told me once, actually, keeping chicken is not so difficult. You have to make sure that you get good quality feed in the chickens, that they eat it, that they drink enough, and that you don't have too much mortality, so actually low mortality. So to obtain a good weight gain or to obtain good number of eggs, when you talk about layers. Mm-hmm. So in essence, it's only a couple of parameters. But if you look at the whole process around that, because in order to manage these 4 or 5 key performance indicators, you need all the surrounding performance indicators, meaning what's the environment in the chicken house, what's the temperature, what's the environment outside, what is the origin of my chickens, do they come from breeders, where if you talk about broilers, do they come from old breeders or young breeders, did something happen in the hatchery, what vaccination schedule did we already apply, is it an over vaccination or not? So very quickly, when you want to analyze the performance of just these 4 KPIs, you come to a lot more other parameters which you need in order to make a good analysis. Because you want to make an analysis not just for one chicken house. There's a part in the analysis which we are always also doing in the monitoring with early warnings. How are these chickens in this house doing? And if I continue like this, well, where will I end? What's the end weight of the broilers? How many eggs can I still produce with the layers or the breeders? But the second part is, if I'm managing 1,000 houses, why do I have 200 houses really at the bottom of my performance? And why do I have 100 houses always performing so well? To what is that linked? housing design, location. There's so many influencing parameters which we know, some we are even not measuring. So you see, there's no easy answer.
Okay, some integrators that I've spoken to here, they have said that they have their own systems, which means like they know what they're doing and they hire a company to actually do it for them. So what is the difference of choosing something that you have, and what is the difference between someone making their own?
Well, that's a very interesting and good question. I think you can compare what happened, let's say, in the ERP sphere or what happened in the IT sector like 20 years ago. 20 years ago, also everybody had his own server or server park and an IT group who were making their own IT infrastructure. With ERP systems, you have a lot of homemade ERP systems, so administrative IT for organizations. But so many years later, you see that the development in software, with when you look at security, but also if you just look at the possibilities of IT, then it goes so fast, and you need so many people and so many expertise in order to get to make sure that you're at the state of the art and that you're not running behind, that it makes sense to go for working with Amazon or Google or Alibaba in your region on cloud infrastructure, to lease it. If you compare that a little bit to what we are doing, we have so many years of experience in data analytics. We know the complexities of that. We have on top of that inside Evonik nutritional and health experts. We work together with companies with genetic and automation expertise in order to make our algorithms as robust and as good as possible for all different situations in the market. So chickens residing in Europe or chickens residing in Asia, algorithms are trained for that. And thereby we see, because of the volume of the data, much more variability. And when you talk about data and analytics and making sure that you monitor and predict in a good way so that the models perform well, you need this variety of variability. And inside one company, you will always only have the reference framework of that own company. And so it's these two parts that are important there. In the end, also a choice for a partner in that has to reside into the company strategy. But if you see how many companies are today using SAP and Microsoft Dynamics as a standard product, because that is also maintained, upgraded, new features are added, that's something that a company cannot do. And we come across more and more companies that indeed have started to develop things themselves, but then run against the wall, because the speed and the money that goes with that to keep it up to date, that's not easy. I would not only because of that we are in a position in offering a software to a market, but I also say this just as having the experience for 25 years in the market, it makes more sense to work with specialized companies that offer you the latest and the best, rather than just investing yourself in your homemade software.
Yeah, that's a great answer. Thank you so much for that. So what are some of the implementation barriers producers might face, and what are some of the solutions that you can think of?
Well, the basic element is still if you look globally, a stable internet in the rural areas is not always a given. We are in cities and we are always having internet, and Teams and Zoom, they have boosted in all this COVID. But if you look at farming, and recently I talked to a customer and he said, well, we don't have internet. We are putting creating a pipeline of 50 kilometers to make sure that we have a basic internet there. So reality today is that in the areas where chickens are kept, there's not so much internet. So the question is, how much data can you collect automatically already today? And there I go back to look at the infrastructure that you have, use smartphones, because smartphones everybody has, and start small, start simple. Smart farming, as I mentioned, is a process, and you do it step by step. You make a long-term strategy out of that. It may be a 10, 15 years plan, and the first sensible thing might be, let's equip everybody with a smartphone and have, first of all, standardized data. Because when you have standardized data, then you can also do sensible analytics afterward. So another threshold, of course, is the fact that when automation is present, a lot of these systems, they reside in farms for 10, 15, 20 years. And now we are in a phase that you are still coming across farm control systems, which are pretty old and which were not really made to exchange data with other systems. So there's some work and some challenge, and that's expertise that we have gained in the last 10 years, how to extract data from these older controllers. What we see now is that more and more of these companies like the big Dutchmans and the Echo's, CTB groups of this world, they are providing more and more APIs so that you can more easily collect data. But the percentage of control systems in the market, which is completely API compatible, it's not so high at this moment. The way forward is clear. But if you want to start with smart farming today, it's the way backward. So that also means that when you come to a producer, they will always have a multitude of situations, meaning they might have a very state-of-the-art chicken house with high-speed internet, the latest of control systems, easy to connect. Then they have a part of their farms which have older control systems, not so easy to connect. Maybe internet not so good, and then they have a part of farms which are completely not connectable automatically. So you need to work with a smartphone app, and maybe based on Google Sheet data collection and on the completely automated way up to API. So it's always a hybrid situation with each and every customer. So we developed over the last years the different options how to collect and gather data from an organization. Because in the end, if you can only collect data of these, let's say, 10% modern farms, then you don't have a solution. And you should always aim, when starting to smart farming, to look at what you can do for all your farms. And then you can look at the smartphone app data collection, but with a very smart planning module for your slaughterhouse, maybe. Or you focus, there's different, I could give you multiple scenarios, but I think you understand what I mean.
Yeah, it's really interesting when you said, it's still possible to collect some data from the older equipment or the machines that we have already.
But there are conditions. Mm-hmm. So there are possibilities, but not everything is possible. And there's also some interesting companies now which can directly get into the data streams of such a farm control, like a retrofit. Mm-hmm. But also that is not 100% covering all the controls in the world. So we have thereby, there's multiple solutions to try to collect the data as easy as possible. But hey, let's be honest, if you come with a control of more than 25 years ago and you have very poor internet, then it's wiser maybe to start with that farm with a smartphone app and later do an upgrading and then get into the automatic connection. When you have a strategy and when you know what to gain by putting another 50,000 euro in a chicken house or in that farm, to get it upgraded, if that return on investment calculation makes sense, then there's no barriers anymore just to do it, because then I get even more data, I get better information, I make better decisions, and I make more money because I can sell my product as a premium product, as an example. So these fears, they are all related to the fact that there's now I see it's now reducing, but the last 5 years there was a big okay, we have to do smart farming. Okay, but how? And how will you do that? And how will you fit that in your strategy? And when these discussions have not been done, often these projects become a disappointment. because it's not clear, and then there's money spent and there's no added value because they're not using it right, and then the disappointments come. So
okay, so so how would all of this that we talked about, like how would it benefit environmental sustainability and also in terms of food safety as well?
So let's take the first one. Environmental sustainability. Well, I think as a sector, we have done a fantastic job that broilers and layers, how we have to put in 1.4 to 1.8 kilo to get of plant product of feed to get our food back. With that fast development, there has become some pressure on the excreta and the nitrogen levels in the feed, and then also in the manure, and as a result ammonia, and this is bringing a pressure on the environment. That's clear. But there's already for 10, 15 years, there are solutions available to put less protein, so less nitrogen into the feed. And there's quite some companies doing work with that. Also at Evonik, we have quite some expertise there to lower that nitrogen content, which is then still giving the chicken enough nutrients that they need, but at the same time the concentration in the excreta is going down. Now that concept, but in order to manage that, so to change from a high nitrogen diet to a lower nitrogen diet, you can expect some changes in the chicken. So you need to look at that, at such a change in a 360 way, meaning measuring the data, monitoring, and when then something goes wrong, because maybe the feeding program has not been adapted optimally yet, that you can signal it and that you can adjust. So by doing that, you can switch to a production which has less impact on the environment. And at the same time, you can measure, in Europe, I'm not sure how that status is in Asia, but you have air washers and you have monitoring systems to see what is coming out of the chicken house in terms of concentrations of ammonia and dust. So sensors exist, methods of improving production exist. It is a question of adopting it and applying it within that framework. And there are steps that can be made. And if I look here in our own region, here in Belgium and Holland and Germany, there's extremely big pressure from politics. So these things will happen in the next coming years. And so I see this also happening in other regions worldwide. Yeah, food safety is linked to what we have seen in the outbreaks, and let's take the example of the swine fever in China recently, and a couple of years ago there was, of course, avian influenza. That's linked to food safety. So professional supply chains are at the basis of high food safety. Food security also, but mainly food safety. And when you're doing more in professionalized supply chains and production processes, you need IT technology to support that, and you need data to support that. So by adopting the IT in and professionalizing poultry production further, especially in the Asian region, then you automatically come to a better food safety, because you know what is happening in each part of the chain, and you can guarantee a better food safety at the end of the chain of the food that consumers eat from day to day.
Kristof, thank you so much for coming on board today to enlighten us on the key points producers need to contemplate on in introducing smart technologies in poultry farming.
You're very welcome. It was a pleasure.
I hope you managed to glean some of the key points we heard about using smart systems in poultry farming. Please do share this podcast with your colleagues and industry contacts. And come back soon to see what else Asian Agribiz has to offer in our exclusive knowledge about the animal protein industry. You may share the link and other pertinent info from www.asian-agribiz.com. This is Arif signing off from Indonesia.